Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Vacuous Vocation. Today it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Adam Haman onto the show. Um, Adam, before I ask you to say a few words about yourself, I would like to say about how we met. Um, we met at Mises University, 2018, amongst our mutual friends, Alex Lewis and Alan Wheeler. And I know those guys miss you. And shout out to those guys. And I do want to take the opportunity to, I guess, tie myself to Alex Lewis because we all know he would push the button harder than
Oh
anyone
yeah.
else.
Oh yeah.
And
He'd break his hand immediately.
He thinks he can, you know, be covert in the mainstream neoclassical sense. But we all know that he's the biggest anarchist of them all.
Yeah.
But,
No, you're not wrong. Shout out to those guys. They're absolutely great.
yeah, they're epic.
One of the greatest pleasures I had there at Mises U. I mean, first of all, Tom Woods got me the insiders, trip. I wasn't a scholar or anything. I had no reason to be there, but he was very kind to just let me go and attend and watch what happened. And I was there by myself, so that's kind of lonely. So I saw the three of you hanging out, I think at breakfast one day, and I just sort of barged my way in, and you guys were great. Just an awful lot of fun. Yeah, you made the week an awful lot of fun, and it's so cool to see the fruits of Mises U. You going on and pursuing a career. It looks like in academics, putting up some great work. And I don't know what those two guys are doing right now, Alan or Alex, but I'm sure it's awesome. The Mises U is a great program. I love that they do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to showcase. I'm wearing the new Mises Institute T-shirt. This is the here. I'll show you the back. It's Renato Moicano who said after his win. Can you see it?
Oh yeah. Of course, the
He
MMA
said,
guy.
"Yeah, if wait, I don't know, I don't know how easy it is to show, but yeah, he said, after his win, if you love your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the seven
The
principles of
six principles or
yeah
whatever it was.
of the
Yeah,
Austrian School of Economics. It was
yeah, that
pretty
was.
legendary." And
I
Alan
mean,
actually showed a graph of the Google searches from that time of Ludwig von Mises and Austrian economics and just skyrocketed. And I'll probably include it in the podcast. But
yeah, we're catching on in all sorts of amazing and unexpected places.
yeah,
So a little white pill, ladies and gentlemen.
absolutely. Um, I don't know what you think about this, but I've been like thinking about, why is it that Austrians have given up on art? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just assume the left owns art, but I think that's because it's vacuous of, no pun intended, of any like Austrian or right wing people. Um, but if Taylor Swift was like an anarcho-capitalist, the world would be different.
Well, yeah, but she probably would write horrible music. Um, I think there's something to just the fact that the creative types are not the types that tend to think in these really logical, rigorous ways, like an Austrian would, a priori from first principles. That's not how you do free association and create stuff. So I wouldn't expect our values and our best science and things like economic theory. I wouldn't expect that to go hand in hand with artistic creation, which means that we have to be present in the culture so that people, young people just get these ideas. And then if they happen to be of a creative tendency, that sort of stuff is just embedded in the work. The way, the American ethos was just sort of embedded in the movies and TV shows and stuff that came out in the 50s. It needs to be in the culture first. And how you do that, I don't know exactly. You can't force it.
I mean, I think it is really just ending the institution of public education or opting out of it and like doing the Ron Paul uh, programs and stuff like that. Um, But
That's making a big movement, right? I mean, Corey
mhm,
DeAngelis is doing the Lord's work there with school choice. It's passed in Arizona, in West Virginia, and maybe a handful of others, and it's starting to become like something people really want. One of the silver linings of that COVID fiasco was that parents finally got to see what sort of nonsense the teachers were doing to the kids that they're sending to them. So
yeah,
that's great, and yeah, I believe that we have to, if we want a more free world, we have to separate school and state. I mean, ideally abolish the state altogether, but we sure as hell shouldn't let the monopolistic state educate our kids, because it's going to teach them to worship the monopolistic state as it does, and that's a pernicious mind virus.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But let me ask you. Let's switch subjects a little bit. I want to ask you about epistemology. Um, as I begin, hopefully, creating a lecture series on economics, I want to begin with epistemology, and I guess, yeah. How do we know what we know? I
Yeah,
don't know.
no,
I want to. Yeah, yeah,
that's the question. I guess I never did really introduce myself to your fine
mm,
audience.
yeah. Please, please,
My
please
name
do.
is Adam Haman,
I
and
apologize if. Sorry to interrupt you. I apologize if I mispronounced your name on the intro.
oh, no worries. Nobody knows how to pronounce anything. Um, I was a poker player for the bulk of my life, like 30 years or so. I went to Arizona State University, which I think is where you're at right now, right?
Yes.
Nearby, and
Uh
got
huh.
myself a business finance degree that I never used. I started playing cards and winning right away. Um, and even back then, I read Ayn Rand in college and knew I was a libertarian immediately, and then was sort of interested in libertarian political philosophy for those 30 years, on the side while I was, making the round at the tables. Um, but recently, I'm trying to sort of put that behind me and do writing at my Substack, which is hamannature.substack.com. And I've got a YouTube podcast called Haman Nature. Search for it in quotes, because that damn catchy Michael Jackson song will pop up if you don't. It's a great song. Um, so anyway, that's sort of what I'm doing. And then I ran into Matt again, which was so great at Freedom Fest. The Libertarian Party of Nevada has a booth there, and this young man came wandering up and said, "Hey, dude, remember me?" And eventually, I did. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's who I am. And epistemology is something I write about a lot. Um, I don't think people think nearly enough about what they believe and why, what the justification for belief is. And even philosophers, I think, go off on weird directions about this. They make it more complicated than it needs to be. Um, they'll come across some, obvious thing that our senses, aren't perfect. They can lie to us, and then they'll come to some crazy conclusion like we can know nothing then, um,
Mm.
which is kind of goofy. So yeah, I just think a whole bunch about what we believe and why we believe it, and how sure we should be about the things we believe. So yeah, we could talk about that a little bit. There's some specific corner of that you're interested in, or
I guess I really am interested in that position that like philosophers make it more complicated than it needs to be, and like the whole like postmodern, which I really don't know much about postmodernism, but the idea that like we don't know any objective truths,
right?
or everything is like subjective. I'm not even sure,
Yeah,
but
I think the problem there is just a reliance on hard logic. Like, wasn't Descartes' whole thing about backing himself into the most irreducible thing he knows? I think, therefore I am, and then he tried to build some flimsy construct, on top of that, where he ended up believing in God somehow. Um, but the mistake is thinking that you have to have a logical proof or you don't know anything. That's not the case. We are messy creatures with imperfect senses in a world we understand a little bit. And that's what we are. We don't have mathematical proofs that we can deduce 100% and know everything with certainty. That's not how we're built. So our epistemology has to necessarily be imperfect and contextual. And that doesn't mean you don't know how to cross the street. You know, we do know things, we just don't know them perfectly. We do have information that's useful from our senses and our internal dialogue. It's just not 100% perfect, and that's okay. I think people tie themselves in knots trying to have some sort of a perfect theory of epistemology. And then even laymen sort of, because that's what the intellectuals think, or I think they think, maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, the laymen sort of get themselves tripped up like that because that's how they think. They find ways to make sure that they're certain about things that there's no way they could be certain about. Like geopolitics across the world or something, or whether there's aliens on other planets, or who really shot Kennedy, or, well, I guess that one's getting a little bit more fleshed out. Who shot Trump, say? I think people are just hardwired to pretend like they know something for certain when they really don't, and they should just be honest and admit that. You don't have to
Mhm.
put yourself in a binary spot where I think one way or I think the other. And there's nothing in between, no shades of gray. That's crazy.
Mhm. Um, so what are the metaphysics then? Uh, I guess. Because I don't know. I've been thinking more about, like, you know, God or dimensions and religion and even just like vibrations and
Mm,
life and
those are
death.
great questions. I think anybody who told you they had a certain answer is probably blowing smoke. Um, I don't think there's any good reason to believe in other dimensions, except it happens to fit some mathematical formula that we're hypothesizing can describe the physics and the cosmology of our universe. But we don't understand those equations or our physics or our cosmology or our universe. So I would put the dimensions thing sort of as a keen idea, maybe. And
Hmm.
you can make it a plot point in horrible Marvel movies if you're lazy.
Hmm.
Um, I think similarly about religion. If you're talking about the metaphysics of stories of a being, an other, not another worldly being, an other dimensionally, other, a being outside of time and space, I don't see any evidence for that. Which doesn't mean, by the way, that I don't find tremendous value in religious in values that come from religion, um, insights about human nature and that sort of thing. I'm a creature of Western civilization like you are, and Christianity is a huge part of that tradition. I can't ignore that, even though I don't think there's any reason to believe in some divine being outside of time and space again. And I think similarly, like you see smart people saying that it's a trillion to one odds that we live in a simulation. Um, Nick Bostrom, he says that, I think, um, which is just goofy, I think. If you're familiar with that argument, Matt,
Um, no.
let me lay it down for you.
Okay.
Apologies, Nick, if I screw this up, but he says that we are clearly a species that likes to create simulations. A play is one of those, and then video games, and then, virtual reality. It's clearly a thing we like to do. Um, Therefore, and technology, in our entire experience of being humans, technology only gets better and better and better. Therefore, humanity will, at some point in its timeline, create simulations that are, for the people inside them, they're indistinguishable from reality. And then people in those simulations will create simulations. And therefore, since we don't know where we've been born on the great human timeline, the odds are trillions and trillions to one that we're actually in the base reality before we even learned how to do this sort of thing yet. So it's trillion to one odds that we're in a simulation. To which I say, you're a real smart guy, but that's nonsense. You have literally zero data points of humanity creating a simulation that's imperceptible from reality for the observers inside it. So you don't have any
Yep.
reason to hypothesize that this thing is even possible, you know?
Right. And like phrasing it in the odds way
Yes.
means
Yes.
that, like, yeah.
I wrote a I wrote a Substack article. Maybe you'll be able to put it in your show notes, but it's titled
Sure.
something like Odds, Probability, and Nonsense, in which I talk about this because I'm a gambler. I mean, I know what odds are. You give me a fair die and a clean roll, and I know what the odds are of each, surface coming up. That's what odds are. But we use that term sloppily when we're just talking about guesses. Like I think the Chiefs are a 2-1 favorite to beat, the Lions or whatever. But that's not odds. That's just guess what you think the future is going to be. And yeah, Bostrom here is using the term like probability when he literally has 0 data points. Like, are you
Mm.
familiar with the Drake equation? It's about somebody who I think was in the 70s or 60s hypothesizing that there must be human life, or not human life, but life on other planets. And then he made this equation, which was, X number of galaxies and X number of stars and X number of habitable planets,
Mm.
for life forms like ours, and then blah, blah, blah. And the whole point was to give you an intuition that um, it's more likely than not that life exists in the universe that's not human life. And okay, that's a neat hypothesis, but it's not odds. At least here you have one data point, us. But that's not
Mm.
enough to tell you anything about the nature of the universe. You're just spitballing here, and we're using sloppy language, which I argue leads to sloppy thinking. And we should just be more careful about that. And hey, I'm a
Mm.
Star Trek geek. I want life on other planets too, but I'm not willing to lie to myself about what the odds are supposed to be. We don't know. You have to be comfortable not knowing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do want to say, this is also changing subjects, that you got to meet my professor, Darren
I
Jurgen.
did.
He also plays poker,
Oh,
longtime
cool.
poker player.
I
And
know I
I
like that
wish,
guy.
yeah, I wish you guys got to talk. But I will shout out him and the Menger Institute, which we're just starting. And yeah, I mean, hopefully, I don't know if you're interested, you can be connected with us
Yeah,
and
he handed me. In fact, just this morning I was reading the pamphlet he handed me about it. I'm totally on board. Meeting him was a
awesome.
fun story too. I was standing in front of my little booth, Libertarian Party of Nevada at Freedom Fest, and some guy, some rando. I mean, he told me who he was with, but I have no idea. He came by and asked to interview me, just like that. No preamble, no subjects. I'm like, yeah, sure, I don't care. So I stood by the little sign, and he started firing me all these questions that mostly had to do with how stupid libertarianism is as a political philosophy. He thought he was some smart guy and he was going to poke a bunch of holes in it. And he did ask some interesting questions. But I gave him the full monty, man. Not only am I an advocate for small government, minarchist style, I'm a full blown ANCAP. And so I was just giving him all these crazy answers about how we don't need a monopolistic state using, unjustifiably using force on peaceful people to have all the societal institutions of a peaceful and productive society that we all want. And his brain was just exploding in real time in front of me. Anyway, when I'm done with that, your professor is standing there like a couple yards away, and he's just clapping and cheering. He's like, yeah. What he thought was going on is he thought it was a guy from the Libertarian Party doing the interview, and I was just some weird anarchist who had stopped by. He didn't realize that I was the libertarian, because he had, from previous decades, a sort of more milquetoast understanding of who a libertarian is and what they think.
Hmm.
Well, it's a new day in the Libertarian Party. We're different now. A lot of us are ANCAPs, and so yeah, he introduced himself, and I had no idea that he was your professor at that point. But
Yeah, he helped. He was the one that introduced me to the Mises Institute and helped send me to Mises University.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I give him all the credit for who I am. And then he's helped send some other students of his to Mises U, and so he was teaching at Occidental, but Occidental has gotten rid of him because they're not in support of any free market theory. Um, but thankfully, he's teaching at UCLA at the moment, and like the students love him there as they did at Occidental. And he's going to teach another semester in the fall, and then hopefully January next year we're going to start teaching at the Menger Institute and get that
Yeah,
up and running.
I hope that project really blossoms. I took a look at the literature, and it looks like a very solid course of study from the Austrian perspective.
I mean, I'm so excited because like I don't know. Yeah, I'm just my professor's never been on a podcast, not even
Oh,
mine.
really?
So, but he's amazing. And so like I'm so excited for him to teach cuz his students love him like his class fills up the fastest.
Oh, I'm going to reach out. He's coming on my podcast if I have to drag him.
Please drag him. Yeah. um so yeah, I'm very excited for that. And it's going to be completely free to students. So we're going to be
Wow.
completely donor based. So we're just starting, so we're looking for donors and
And if I
yeah.
read correctly, it's in person too, right? It's not.
It's in person. We're figuring out. We're probably gonna also have like online formats. I can't say for certain, but we definitely want it in person. Yeah, for sure.
That's obviously preferable. Um, I mean, I love this digital thing that we have access to, but there's something about. I mean, we're embodied creatures, you know.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
spiritual, but we're embodied. Part of our spirituality is in our physical being, and there's just no substitute for being with somebody when you want to learn from them.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Like it's you can learn anything you want through the internet, but when
Sure.
you put yourself in person, like you're having that real experience, and that will like change you. You know what I mean? Your whole life will have you'll have that experience. You've gone through that, and I think that's amazing. So I'm so looking forward to that. Um, but yeah, so um, I don't know. What are you thinking?
Oh, I don't know. In preparing to be on your show, I was watching your interviews with a few people, and one of them, nice get, Thaddeus Russell. That's pretty impressive, dude.
Yeah, I know. So the backstory with that, because maybe he'll check this out. But um, Michael Weimer, his co-host for their show Unreported, um, I asked him to come on, and he came on, and I really like Michael. And then Thaddeus was kind of butthurt that he wasn't invited, so he emailed me, and I emailed him, and he came on, and I really really like that. So that was great.
Oh no,
No?
no! I just had a horrible thought. I haven't had Tom Woods on my show, but I have had
Yeah.
Jeff Deist and
Wow.
Scott Horton and Bob Murphy and Stephen
Wow.
Kinsella and Doc Dixon.
Wow.
I just figured I
Uh
should be a little bit bigger before I get a big name like Tom on.
I mean,
I mean, those guys are
I know
big too, but
you're a guest of the Tom Woods show, and maybe we can link your interviews on Tom Woods in the show notes. But
there was only one, and it was a long time ago, but it was epic.
yeah. Okay, cool. Um I don't know, like that like if you heard me mention, I was like, "Oh, like I don't have like thousands of followers." So I thought he wouldn't come on, but I think it's just like you just got to like you just got to do it. You just got to like
You got to
get
put
whoever you
yourself out
can.
there. You never know.
Yeah,
Oh, and
exactly.
I had Michael Humer on my show too. He
Wow.
just responds to requests and comes on. He's like he said he made a decision a long time ago when he put out the book, "The Problem of Political Authority." I think that's the
Mm.
name. He just started to get requests, you know, from little guys like you and me to come on libertarian leaning type shows and talk about it. And he said, "Well, I'm either going to take them all or I'm going to take none." So he decided to
Wow.
take them all.
Wow. I'll, man, you got me inspired. I want to be more like proactive and reach out to people and
You should.
like him and everyone. I
I was
think,
interested. He was sort of dissing uh, your thesis about the state causing suicide, which I love, by the way. I told you in
thank
Freedom
you.
Fest, I think the state is evil and pernicious in a zillion different ways. But despite how much I've read and watched and thought, I've never thought about how much it contributes to suicide, except for the war aspect. You know, veterans coming back and blowing their brains out
Yeah.
from what they were exposed to and what they were forced to do. So I love a rigorous Austrian uh, critique and analysis of that subject. Yeah, and it's
Thank you.
coming into print here.
It
With
is. Oh, I'm so excited. I will say you got me thinking from your feedback on that. I think um, that the state, like, okay, so Thad's point was that the state doesn't want you to kill yourself. But I think it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they don't care because the citizens are not fully assets. They almost become liabilities. So I think, obviously, if everyone died, then the state couldn't exist. So they do want people to be alive to some extent, but I just don't think that they care.
To give Thad some cover, he said that he didn't think Foucault would like your thesis too much from one particular perspective. And since I've never read Foucault, I can't say. But yeah, obviously the state doesn't want you to kill yourself. You are their cash cow. But I think, nevertheless, the state has other interests. It feeds off us. And one of the costs of doing business, so to speak, of that process is some of the citizens are going to kill themselves. And they're fine with that, the state.
Hmm.
It would be horrible if 100% of them did. But if we can get filthy rich and make ourselves kings and queens and narcissists and, play the game of Risk with real people all across the globe, and a fraction of a percent of people kill themselves, yeah, that's fine. What the hell do they
Yeah.
care?
And I was I'm reading this book by Auburn Spencer, something like that. But sorry, but it's called "The Right and Wrong of the Compulsion of the State," I think. And like in it, he had this one sentence that really like caught my attention, and he was talking about basically programs, the democratic program versus people. And so it becomes like, do you care more about people or programs? Do you care more about democracy or people? And I think what I really like about the argument that the state produces more suicides than what otherwise would occur in a free society is that you can attack the left from the left. If you really care
Sure.
about the most marginalized people, the victims, it's always the lone individual, a person, who's feeling like, as much as people care about mental health nowadays, it's like, well, then let's discuss mental health, suicidality,
Yeah.
depression, despair. Where is it coming from? Why is it increasing? Like, we're getting more prosperous technologically, and so it's like, to that extent, capitalism isn't perfect, but neither is democracy or the state for that matter. And um and so then it's also like leaves a big hole to discuss economics and monetary manipulation with the left. It's like, well, if the effects of printing more money is inflation and lowering the standard of living for people, and this is driving people into like more like existential anxiety and despair and suicidality, then like, don't you want to discuss this, leftists?
You'd
Don't you want to
think.
discuss living conditions?
My co host on my YouTube show, Tyrone, the porcupine hobo, he calls himself, he really harps on this issue a lot. He lays at the feet of the fiat money system a whole host of societal ills, and he's right. Um, you want to create that focus on democracy versus people. It sounded an awful lot like the difference between thinking about systems and thinking about goals. And I think shallow-minded people, of which the left has a bunch, they think about goals. Just, I want people happier or healthier or fed or better education. They're not good about thinking about the systems that are required to make that happen, or at least do the best job that an imperfect species like humanity is capable of. And we are system thinkers. I mean, the whole edifice of anarchism and what Austrian economics is. But anyway, yeah, I love the idea that I haven't read your thesis yet, but I think you're laying out what a free society is, and then showing the interposition of the state does to that system to cause people who would not kill themselves to feel an urge to kill themselves. And on the margin, as we know as good economists, some will. And I think
Hmm.
that's a great thing to force them to focus on. As you said, attack the left from the left and the right from the right, because they're not evil people. They have goals that are worthy. They just aren't going about it right. Thank heavens we libertarians are here to help.
Yeah. Um. Shoot, I lost the point I wanted to make.
um, well, you mentioned capitalism and like it not being, the answer. You're having that discussion with uh, Thaddeus's co-host. Forget the name.
Michael.
Yeah, you're having that discussion with Michael, and he like seemed frustrated that capitalism doesn't answer, the the search for meaning. What the important things in a person's life. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the first principle of economics is compared to what? Or the first question, compared to what? Why would you think an economic system is the thing that's going to provide meaning? I mean, it
Yeah.
could. It could if you happen to be able to make, provide sustenance and a roof over your head and feed your family with something that you find meaning in. But an economic system isn't where you get meaning. That's what we have other systems of value for, and family and the
Mm,
church and relationships, all the values you get from all the people you admire. Yeah, that doesn't have to just come from your day job. Right? Thank heavens.
yeah.
What kind of a ridiculous existence would that be? Where the only way you could find meaning is, with your job. No, thank heavens we have all these other institutions and sources of meaning,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. I think Mises would agree. I think he does write that like capitalism is the best means to improve the material standards of living, but the internal psychological, the spiritual wealth and peace and happiness is not a product of capitalism. It's a product of your ideas and yourself. And right now I'm reading. I just started Abraham Maslow's The Further Reaches of Human Nature, and this book is. I've only read the first two chapters in the intro, but like it's driving me crazy. Like I really like it, and he's just talking about like to be a good he defines not in the normative sense. He does argue for normative sciences, but he defines good as something that best fits the definition of it. And so then he will talk about a good society being conducive to like good citizens, and that being the conditions in order to achieve like a self actualization.
Is this an old book? Is this the Maslow's
It
hierarchy of needs,
Yes,
Maslow?
yes, yes.
Okay.
It came out in 1971, and
The guy
I
sounds
mean, yeah,
platonic almost.
a little bit, yeah. But I think there's something to that. Like I don't know. I mean, like I guess my critique of capitalism is that, well, it's not even a critique as much as like you said, it's an observation that it doesn't lead you to find meaning per se, but it gives you the best shot
Oh
at
yeah, it
finding.
clears up. I mean, remember what it replaced: back-breaking drudgery just to stay alive. If
Mhm.
you can, through the miracles of capital accumulation and the division of labor, spend a fraction of your day feeding yourself, that clears up all this time and resources for you to pursue things that are meaningful to you.
Yeah,
You're never going to have the blues and and rock and roll until until you've got a capitalistic society that allows people the time and freedom to put 10,000 hours into that. So
yeah,
that's its great contribution. And the fact that it doesn't actually do everything for you and give you meaning, well, come on now, you're asking a lot.
yeah. That's true. Yeah. I am really, I guess, just excited for that work to come out, and that's what I'm working on right now with my PhD is the economics of suicide, and I don't know, it's a little
You
bit daunting.
are you going to be part of the institute? Are you going to be teaching?
The Menger Institute, yeah,
That's fabulous,
yeah.
fabulous, dude.
I'm so excited.
Do you have any? Well, not this is me interviewing you. Do you have any goals to go back to Mises U and give lectures and do stuff like that?
Um, I would love to. I mean, I know that they have quite the caliber of faculty,
They do.
but if if the if the opportunity presented itself, I would very much take that. I was able to go to the Austrian Economic Research Conference
Oh wow,
2023,
sweet.
and I presented my paper there, and it was good. I think I got good feedback actually. Yeah, like really good feedback. So I think for the near future, this will be the bulk of my research and studies and what I'll keep trying to develop. So yeah, but I think it speaks to trying to connect psychology or physiology to praxeology and economics, because like Maslow argues like this is almost a crime to say science is value free because it's developed by people and people have values.
I'm inclined to agree. I know the argument that you can't bridge the is-ought gap. I just don't care. As long as you're
Mm,
not in favor of human misery and are oriented the other direction, well, then you can derive oughts from ises. In fact, that's the whole point of my show. I mean, it's called Haman Nature, little play on words there, but I do
mhm.
believe that humanity has a nature, a specific one. I mean, we are one type of creature and not another, and I believe we live in a specific type of universe. My introduction to
Yeah.
deep thoughts like this was Ayn Rand, so I started with objectivism. And although I don't think she's right about everything, I think her metaphysics is right. And I think it's a perfectly sensible and necessary application of our reason to try and figure out what our nature is, and therefore what our proper mode of behavior in this universe is if we want to flourish. What kinds of institutions should we build? What kind of laws, what kind of norms, even, not being puritanical or anything, but there's going to be a range, that's acceptable for our species. Cannibalism probably isn't on there. Beating our babies to death probably isn't on there. So there's some latitude, but things like private property and the freedom of association, the non-aggression principle, these are things that probably lead to the development of healthy institutions where human beings, due to our nature, can grow and thrive and love and find meaning and accumulate capital, become prosperous, drive down prices, raise up production, all those things that make it possible for life to be great. And so, yeah, to hell with Hume and the is-ought gap. As long as you're not pathologically evil, you know, maybe you have to take a step. There's the nature of the universe, and I want humans to flourish. Okay, I
Mm.
took two moves there, not one. Fine.
Yeah. My friend Foray, who's also in the PhD program, he's much more into philosophy than economics, I would say, but he was like going hard critiquing Mises because he's like, um, you know that Ben Shapiro line, facts don't care about your feelings?
Sure.
His perspective is that, well, feelings don't care about your facts. And if you're going to defang libertarianism by saying it's a value free science, then that only creates a vacuum for the left to come in and moralize, economic systems. So it's like don't abandon normative um, perspectives on science because yeah,
I
what do you
think
think?
uh, I think you're right. I think he did that for a reason, given the time and place that he lived and wrote in. I think he wanted to allow his work to be more scientific, so that he didn't have to defend it on like ideological grounds. You know what I mean? Like,
Definitely.
so I think there was a purpose for that. But yeah, although I think it's okay to say that economics is, what's the phrase in German? I can't remember it. Uh, it doesn't matter.
Economy.
Value free, whatever value
Value
free
free.
is
Yeah.
in German. I think that's true, but I also think that you shouldn't step too far away. You should insist, but I have values. And so therefore, I'm going to take these insights and I'm going to make policy prescriptions based on, the universe that I want to see. And I'm going to use moral arguments like, regardless of what the economics says is going to happen with X, Y, and Z policy, I also think it's immoral for you to use force against a person who is peaceful and has not harmed you in any way. I think the
Yeah.
fact that you think you can, say, make up economic terms like public goods and therefore give yourself some sort of moral right to tax and order me around and whatnot. I think we should always be making the moral case for, freedom broadly and free markets more narrowly, while also recognizing that Austrian economics can stand alone without any moral foundation too. Starting from human beings act, you can actually derive a lot of value-free implications just from that axiom. But yeah, but don't just leave it there, obviously. And then therefore, I want humans to live and be happy rather than starve and die.
Yeah. And I think, it comes to justice and
Yeah,
individual justice.
yeah.
And right now, you have like the progressive social justice people. And so it's like we can't, you know what I mean? Like, if it's an argument of justice, it's going to be normative, because anything, I do believe that there's like no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I believe in the normative sense of good and bad or right and wrong. But if you're going to make an argument for justice and what is just and what is unjust, then it's going to some extent be, I think, arbitrary, and it's determined by your culture. And so that is purely like
Well, you know, we should draw
normative.
a distinction. There's a distinction between what we believe the law should be, and that's, you know, the non-aggression principle, private property, freedom of association, the things that you are not allowed to use force to accomplish. But that doesn't tell us everything about what the just outcomes in any given situation are. It just means that we don't use the law to achieve those ends. It isn't just that somebody starve in the streets, you know, through no fault of their own or whatever. But that doesn't mean you pass a law to fix that. That means you get over there and you help that person.
Hmm.
I think one of the failings of our modern, and again, it goes back to education. Our kids have been taught for over 100 years that the only thing that can solve social ills is a government program. But that's just not true. The government is a very specific sphere of influence. Properly constructed, it should be fairly small. The sphere of private activity, where we should be solving the bulk of these problems that you're talking about what justice is, the government shouldn't have anything to do with that except to stay out of the way. We've got situations where people are trying to feed and house the homeless, and they're being thrown in jail or fined, or shut down because they're violating some sort of a regulation somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, we really need to, boy, we've taken a really wrong turn in worshiping government the way we do. I hope we look back in 100 years at how stupid we were, thinking that's the one size fits all solution for everything social is a law, a new a new piece of legislation. And I think we should keep that in mind. Um,
Yeah. One of the most revolutionary and eye-opening things that I've learned is how in history the private sectors, whether it be a church or community groups, have helped the poor and less fortunate members of society, and how the increasing bureaucracy of state intervention and regulation in society then remove those institutions from existence.
we
And yeah.
I have two podcasts because I am the one true libertarian. The one on YouTube is called Haman Nature, but I do another one with Brian D. O'Leary that's just on podcast feeds. They're both on podcast feeds, but this one's called Natural Order. And we did a long show about back in the day when Alexis de Tocqueville, was talking about how great American society was. He was raving about all these tiny little private institutions that people would use to make their lives better because we are not atomized individuals. We are a social group, social species. And over the years, it's just disgusting how the government has just crowded all those things out until there's hardly any left. And the few that are left are these parasitic NGOs that seem more like some sort of a crony, you know, uh, appendage of the government that, you know, is doing things the government's not allowed to do. Um, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. Private associations they're flexible, they're dynamic, they don't use force, they're voluntary, they're all the good things about human association, that all the things that government is not. Government is force. What's the Washington quote? It's like fire, um, uh, a feared servant. Never mind. Go look up the Washington quote about fire in government. But yeah, it's a tool that I think should be abolished. I don't think we should have monopolistic government. I think we should have governance that you get from free association and contracts and whatnot. But that's different than government.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like the ignorance of economics does go hand in hand with like the lack of knowledge. I mean, it all comes just from, the public education system of taking people at birth, not showing them, you know, truth and history, but you're imposing the values of the state. That the state is the only one that can provide for the less fortunate, because God forbid there's a market for philanthropy. But
right?
no one knows that. They don't know the alternatives. So they just assume, you know, like it's so the what is it? The cave and the light, the
Yeah,
allegory.
yeah. The Plato, the allegory of the cave.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's just like
that's so prescient these days. It's
it
another thing I
is.
write an awful lot about, the difference between the map and the territory. You know,
Okay, what's that?
well, the territory is reality. The
Mm.
map is whatever we're using to try and understand what reality is. Like
Mm.
the ABC news report on Yemen is your map of what's happening in Yemen. You have no idea what's happening in Yemen. You're just looking at a
Yes.
map, and that's that's the cave, Plato's cave.
Yes.
Um,
It reminds me of I've been reading a little bit of Walter Lippmann's public opinion book, and he talks
okay,
about like, a reporter on a battle or something is standing in one perspective and
that's
has
right.
his perspective,
That's right.
and then the way he interprets it and writes about it is going to create another perspective. And so it's like, unless you're even if you're observing something, you will only have your
Your
perspective.
perspective, yeah. And if you're
And
relying on anybody else, then it's a narrative that you're engaging
yes,
with, not reality. And that's another
yeah,
thing. Back to epistemology, something you have to keep in mind is you are always absorbing somebody's narrative. There's no such thing as value-free news. Just the act of editing, picking and choosing, which thing to say, which thing not to say, you know, just that gives you some sort of a narrative structure. You're being fed a story,
hmm
which is fine.
but
That's all we have option to. That's all we have access to. It's not like just because everything is a narrative means you just throw up your hands and say, well, I guess I have no clue. You have to triangulate. You have to listen to a bunch of different narratives to try and understand a particular incident and then try and make your best guess.
but Adam, it was on the news.
It was on the news. You know, I'm older than you are, but I still wasn't around when Walter Cronkite was around. And that's when people used to say, the most trusted name in news. But I find it hard to believe that that was the case. That guy just had to be. He was telling a narrative too, and it's not like the CIA wasn't interested in making sure Walter Cronkite told the story that they wanted him to, or whoever was around then. I guess they were brand
It,
new.
what I find fascinating about the news is the tone that news reporters, the journalists, the anchors use. Right, it's all the same. And now we're reporting live from, and it's very like predictable. Like it's almost an abstraction. It seems like when AI would generate.
It's
It's not like
manufactured
yeah.
gravitas. It's I'm
Mm,
telling you what's happening right now,
yes, with the
and
an air of authority.
I
And
don't believe you, buddy.
yeah, and like assurance, and like I
Yes.
could see how it could be comforting to be reassured, but it's very much like a public official or like a teacher. And I mean that's, to the credit of Curtis Yarvin, the
I do
cathedral.
like to always give. I always like to give the other side or at least another perspective, a shout out. There was something unifying about the fact that everybody, darn near everybody who was educated, heard what Walter Cronkite had to say. At least it was a unifying concept that people could talk about. Right? Like if we all hear the same report, we could meet at the water cooler and have a conversation about that report and really dig into it and bounce ideas back and forth. But if you watched Walter Cronkite and I watched Alex Jones and some other guy watched I don't know, pick a guy, Russell Brand. We're not getting access to the same. How can we even talk to each other? Because one guy will say, they're doing great things with public infrastructure and water, and the other guy's going to say, yeah, but they're making the frogs gay.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying.
I mean, I'm not saying it was better back then. I think it's better now. I'm just saying that it's important to remember, like maybe what we lost, which is that shared universal constant. Like put it in a social context. Back when everybody watched Friends, you're all talking about kind of the same thing. It's a little it's a little disruptive to society, and it's
Oh,
probably
I lost you.
inevitable. I'm just doing that old guy shakes his fist at cloud
Uh
thing,
oh.
but there was
Oh,
something
sorry, I lost you
unifying.
for a second.
Oh, you disappeared.
Sorry. Yeah, I lost you at Friends.
Yeah, well, there was something unifying about that when we were all watching the same show, and it's probably inevitable that we fracture like that. We all watch different stuff, but there was something. If you do care about a broad group of people having a shared consciousness, that sort of thing is there's something nice about that. I'm not suggesting we go back. I'm just saying we are missing something a little bit, and maybe it's something to keep in mind. We were talking about public education. I wanted to admit something. I do
Yeah.
think people your age have access to so much information. It's a blessing. I was in college. Like growing up in my household, I wasn't political. I don't think my parents were. I would have assumed I was a Democrat because all the good guys on the TV, those are Democrats, right? It was the evil guys with businesses, those are the Republicans, right? So I guess I'm a Democrat. It wasn't until I got to college that it dawned on me for the first time that all those resources that the government was doing magnanimous things with, it had to steal first before. It doesn't just have anything on its own, except maybe the land, all the public land, and it just sees that too. And I'm like, oh well, that's not fair. So I spent a couple of months thinking I must be a Republican then, but Rush Limbaugh talked me out of that. And then I
Mm.
read the Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and that was it. It was all over.
Wow. Dang, I have that book. I was just looking at it. Is it worth like? Oh, no, no, no. I've read The Fountainhead, but Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, Atlas Shrugged is amazing. The Fountainhead is a better novel,
Hmm.
but Atlas Shrugged is fantastic. Just recognize that you're going to get some very unnaturally long dialogue, a
Okay.
speech or two where that seems a little inappropriate for a cocktail party or whatever.
Mhm.
But no, it's a great story. She concretized these concepts in such beautiful ways, and the things that the villains, what she has them doing, they've done that. I mean,
Mhm.
she would look at some of the legislation passed after she died and think this is too nutty for me to include in a novel. No one would believe it,
Wow.
but yeah, it's well worth reading. Um, I go back and reread it every, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or so.
Wow. Um, I think to the point of the government idea of like utilizing the resources that it takes from people is under the guise that it's just your friend, your next door neighbor. We're sharing,
We're
Adam.
sharing.
And that's all it is. It's not robbing, it's not nothing like sinister. It's just we're just sharing, and you should feel good that we're sharing
Well,
together.
you're right. We should feel good about sharing. And this framing didn't originate with me, but what's the difference between a beautiful session of making love and rape? Why, it's consent. What's the difference between the guy you stole from the dark continent, working in your fields, and the guy who voluntarily came north from, south of the border to work in your field? What's the difference between those two things? It's consent. And sharing is great. And helping out people, first yourself, then your family, then your community, then the world, doing that is wonderful. We should all think that way and we should all do that way. What makes it good rather than bad? Consent. And I think the allegory that Tolkien tried to give us with the ring of power, the one ring, it's one we should think about. Anytime you think you're doing good with an evil means, you can't do it. The means are the ends. Put down the ring of power, or you're going to make things worse.
You got me thinking. Uh, I would add on to that even if you did feel good about paying taxes and you make the argument that you do consent to paying taxes, it's the government, the state that is inefficient with utilizing those resources to the best of its availability because it doesn't have the profit and loss motive. It's not responding to
Yep.
consumer demand. So it will take that money and spend it on wars and bads and perpetuate, things that are harmful to people in society. So even if you make the argument that I'm feeling good and I want to pay more taxes, well, then the state's going to waste it. So you're better off putting it into, I guess, truly, productive uses. But, but I mean, so like we obviously can observe and analyze that it's not consensual and that the resources are being wasted. But I think for the modern leftist who, does think that it's a good thing, I think we still have to make the economic argument that, well, the government's going to fail you.
Yeah, well, they would disagree with your characterization that it's wasteful what the government is doing because they don't understand why we're saying that. We're saying that because there is no profit and loss mechanism, that they will be used in some arbitrary manner. As they say, the resources will be distributed politically rather than through the economic method.
Hmm.
And that's in the sense in which we say they're wasted, they're used inefficiently. And so you have to drag them back and make that case, or the
Yeah.
moral case that even if you think that um, the purpose is just, you can't steal to get there, and if you do, you haven't made your case. Um, like
I, yeah.
I live in an HOA. I commingle funds to be used collectively all the time. And of course, I give to charities. There's some great ones in Las Vegas. It's amazing, given how enormous the state has grown, that private charity hasn't just dried up altogether. But God bless people that they see that the state isn't doing it. They suck. They build fiefdoms and waste money on fiefdoms. They don't actually help the people that they claim to help. What's the percentage, that of dollars seized by government that are earmarked for specific funds that actually get to the streets, gets to the people? Isn't the bureaucracy like 70 or 80%? Whereas like in a private, it's something much, much lower, ranging from, 10 to 40%. That's because there's no market feedback mechanism. You cannot withhold your dollar that you want to go to philanthropy and choose a better actor who's not riding around in limos and private jets. If you want that money to actually get to the person that needs it.
Yeah. And it's like, man, I think, yeah, we do have to hammer that point that, like, not only does increasing taxation kill the well, there's 2 points, right? The the state taxation kills one's incentive to donate to charity because my money's already going to taxes. You're telling me it's helping these poor people, so I don't want to give more. I already gave, so I'm not going to donate to children's education or hospitals. And then,
And
uh,
on the margin, they can't, right? I
yeah,
mean, if you only had X amount and then the government took, whatever it took, you might not have
yeah,
anything left for.
right. So it kills that warm glow, your ability to consensually give and donate. And then where does the money go? Well, it goes to the bureaucracy. While the quality stays the same. That's the same for education.
Yeah.
The money goes to the bureaucracy, the administration, and the quality of the education stays the same relatively. The war on poverty and homelessness perpetuates it. Um, and 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 the wars. Like, if the wars ended, the military industrial complex would go away. So their business isn't perpetuating. That's like the worst aspect of capitalism, right? Is like the 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 car garage person. I'm not using the right term, but you know what is it? The asymmetrical information that,
Oh
like,
yeah,
if I
your
don't know,
mechanic or your doctor or yeah.
yeah, if I don't know what's going on with my car, my mechanic could tell me anything, and we have to resolve that. But it's like way worse with the government because they're just saying, well, we need to wage these wars, and it's like, I don't know. Like,
I once took my car. This is the '90s. Took my car, a Nissan Maxima, to a place, and it said, I think it was the timing belt or something. He told me a part that didn't exist on this car needed to be replaced. But I didn't have to ever go back to that guy again. Unlike the
yes,
government, he's going to come put his hand in my pocket whether I realize that they're a fraud or not.
yes, it's that Solzhenitsyn quote that we know they're lying, they know
Yeah,
they're lying,
yeah.
they know that we know they're lying, and they
Well,
still lie.
well, we've got there, right? I mean, we're sort of there now.
We're the mask is dropping in real time, and we're getting, like, every day more and more. to that point where they know that we know they're lying, and they're still going to try to lie. And so I think that's just our moment in time that we're at right now, where like we're going through this intervention of really analyzing and critiquing the state for the true nature of what it is. And it's very interesting to see, what happens, how they will respond.
Yeah, we're
But
at the most interesting time in history that I mean, I guess every human thinks they're in such interesting times, but if you were interested in like libertarianism, we've gone from a period where somebody asked Murray Rothbard how many libertarians there were in the country, and he had to think about it. About 25. I think that's what he said. And now, there's hundreds of thousands of us, small L and big L. Um, Javier Milei just got elected the president of Argentina, running as a badass diehard anarcho-capitalist Rothbardian.
yes,
That's amazing. I mean, they had to get to
yes,
150% inflation before things got bad enough that he could get there. But maybe we could learn from an example if he manages to enact some reforms and pull some things off. Dave Smith is talking to like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. That's
yeah,
really good news.
yeah,
Glenn Greenwald is talking to Tucker Carlson. We're getting this cross pollination of ideas, and I'm sure I'm biased, so maybe I'm fooling myself, but I think big thought leaders are moving in our direction a little
yeah,
bit every day, and that could turn into an avalanche, a waterfall. We don't know. Also, the currency could collapse tomorrow, and we're in Mad Max times. Or the government could come round us all up, and I hope you and I get sent to the same gulag there, Matt.
yeah. We'd have some fun.
We'd have some
We'd have
fun.
some fun in our
But
gulag.
it could also go the other way. I don't know what's going to happen, but we live in very fluid, very dynamic, very interesting times. Uh,
Well, I sorry to cut you off. Please.
well, I was just going to say, my show, Haman Nature, Tyrone and I did a mid-year 2024 prediction show, recorded it before the debate between Trump and Biden. And I made a lot of weird predictions, but one of them was that either Trump or Biden or both wouldn't appear on your ballot in November. And then Biden
Wow.
had that disastrous debate performance. And then Trump got
Wow.
shot. And I'm like,
Wow.
whoa.
Wow.
I was 1 inch away from having both of those turn out to be true. Which
That
just goes to
that would
show
be
that,
crazy.
normally in June, if you make a statement like that in an election year, you'd be an idiot because it's
Yeah.
all locked up. These duopoly candidates have already been chosen by whichever oligarchs have paid them off and won the coin toss this year. But not now. Things are weird now, and the faith
Yeah.
in the media and the government is at an all-time low, which is wonderful for you and
Yeah.
me.
Definitely. I think the COVID crisis, the that whole situation really forked the libertarian community
Yeah.
in a very important way, because it totally made a sharp distinction and separation between the libertarians who just want to have, intellectual thought orgasms of like, wow, isn't this idea great? And then the libertarians who are like, do you see the authoritarianism going on? And
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to respond to that? And Dave Smith, who I love and adore, and Michael Malice, and Javier Milei have just really stood up against that and have brought new energy. Like you said, like the libertarian movement is different now. It's ANCAPs primarily. I mean, with the Mises
Well, the
Caucus.
fork, I want to focus on that for a second because it
Yeah,
was stark and it was exactly along the lines of how you reacted to the COVID. And it was the Reason magazine and the Cato Institute people and the sort of left leaning types that used to run the Libertarian Party that were firmly on the blue pilled side of that fork. And all the rest of us, including most of the ANCAPs, were on the red pilled side of that fork. And it illuminated the fact that it's not enough to just sort of believe in a libertarian political philosophy. Um, you have to it's the red pill. Do you believe that our power centers are fundamentally good and honest and telling us the truth? And if they lock us in our homes for a year or two and close the schools down, it's basically for our own good? or is it not for our own good? Uh, when the rubber hits the road, do you really believe in freedom, or are you just smiling and laughing at a cocktail party about, oh, I like free markets mostly? Are you
Hmm.
for real or not? I mean, that was the divide in my mind. Are you for real or not? And a whole bunch of them were not. And I think
Yeah,
that's it's nice to see that distinction made real, made manifest. It
definitely.
helps.
Yeah, it really provided a filter, in a sense,
Yeah.
for libertarians, for
And it
people.
and it was clarifying. Like that divide was always there, right? But we couldn't tell.
Right,
Couldn't tell who
right.
was on it, who was on one side or the other. So it was oh boy, what a roller coaster of emotions that COVID thing was. I was so depressed. Mostly because I sort of knew that my government was evil enough to do that to me. But I was so depressed that there was so little pushback.
Mm,
It broke my will to play poker for a living, really. One, because they closed the casinos, but even when they reopened them, they made the players wear masks, which is just retarded, and then also sit behind these little plexiglass. You look like you're in a little plexiglass menagerie. Think of a poker table, right? You're all in this little cubicles, and then there's a little slot where you push your chips and your cards through. And my compatriots would just go back there and, yeah, okay, let's deal them up. Let's play cards. Don't you have a shred of self respect? And don't you realize that that diaper on your face isn't doing anything? You're sitting in a closed room with other people breathing the same air for hours. You think that stupid mask is doing something to protect you from a airborne virus? And I don't know, man. I just got mad. I didn't want to. You shouldn't play cards angry, and I
mm,
found myself really angry. Um, yeah, and the amount of pushback was so. The fact that there was so little of it was so bad, and I was annoyed at where it was like coming from. Like I shouldn't have to depend on Ron DeSantis, you know. It should have been other people. It should have been Reason and Cato, if they were worth a damn. Um,
mhm.
and the Libertarian Party should have been screaming about it, but they didn't. They didn't say a word.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is a silver lining that I think it really did, and it still is waking people up, because now we do live in the wake of COVID.
Yep.
That even if people can memory hole it, that's what happened, and so we're on this like post-COVID trajectory, which I do think the only rational way to proceed is with an optimistic perspective,
I agree.
and that uh
It's funny. You were.
yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, buddy, but
No, no, please.
you were talking with that other guy, whose name I keep forgetting. Mike.
Michael Weimer.
Yeah. I'm sorry, dude. Um. Yeah. He kept saying like he wasn't an anarchist anymore, and then he said why, and it was like these emotional reasons. Like I felt bad hating the state or something. Like I didn't want to be angry all the time. And I hate the state too, but being an ANCAP doesn't make me anxious or angry or unhappy. It's just my North Star. I know the proper way for political uh, or institutions to be organized. That's a good thing. That shouldn't make you unhappy. Yeah, sure, I hate the state. I'll throw rocks at it. But what I'm trying to do is build institutions around the state so we don't need it anymore. I don't want a
Yeah.
bloody revolution. That would be horrible. But I do believe it sucks and it's going to wither away and die. And I just think we should shout from the rooftops what the right way for humans to organize on a voluntary basis with very simple things: contracts, freedom of association and disassociation, private property. And we have a rich tradition in Western civilization of common law that gives us a little head start how to build these institutions. And we've been writing about them for decades now. So, yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm also horrified. Don't get me wrong. Catch me on any given day. But no, I think we need to be optimistic. Life is beautiful.
Yeah. There's a tremendous amount outside of our control, but the like you said, what we can do, what's in our control, I think is be those intellectual guiders for our
Yeah.
community, and have good energy, because Murray Rothbard hated the state more than anyone, but he was that happy warrior, and he, I believe, had a sign above his desk that said like hatred. What was it? Hatred is my muse, or something like that. I think it's like having just like, a dysfunctional family member who's a compulsive liar and like a horrible person. It's like you can still love your life and recognize that, this person is a part of your life, not by choice, but just by happenstance and circumstance. And like you have to figure out how to deal with them, right? But like you don't have to let them affect your life. And I think that's, yeah.
No, I mean, I think you're exactly right. And I was just thinking about the growth trajectory of this movement in this country. Again, it was just tiny, and it's always been mostly angry males on the spectrum, probably, most likely, socially awkward. But as we grow, that tends not to be the case as much anymore. We have more women in the movement. The men involved aren't these weirdos, necessarily. You see a lot more smiles, a lot less furtive glances.
Mm,
I think we're growing, and that means we're getting more healthy people, which means we're going to project that positive, healthy attitude you were just talking about, which is socially infectious. You
yeah,
know,
it's very important.
people, our species emulates each other. Most
Hmm.
people are looking for someone to emulate, some role model, a bunch of role models, ideally. And so, if we can go out into the world and preach this message that I do believe to be the truth, I think if we do that in the right way, if we embody it, then people will want to be like us and they will listen to us and follow us.
I want to tell you this, which I think you'll be proud of. But before I went to Spain in 2021, I applied and got accepted to the Ron Paul Scholars Seminar. I was one
Nice.
of 10 students on his like 1 day boot camp on foreign
Nice.
policy. And I applied again this year. So August 1st, I'll figure out if I can go back. But I think Ron Paul is a great example. And he would ask like, "What's your tone when you're speaking about these ideas?"
Yeah.
And I think so many people resonate with Ron Paul because he seems like this happy, old, cheerful grandpa type guy, but intellectually is like cutthroat against the state.
There's also something about um, not trying as best as you can to not make it personal. You can criticize the way somebody's thinking, an idea that's in somebody's head without saying he's a piece of crap. And
Yeah,
once you've made it really personal, people, look at what kind of creature we are. Look at our human nature. Once you make it personal, people dig in and aren't even listening to you anymore. So try not to do
yeah,
that. I've had
definitely.
plenty of stupid ideas in my head that were evil and destructive, and I don't have them anymore. Or
Yeah,
as many, I hope. So just recognize that we're all in a period of growth. Um, Try
yeah,
to. Well, here's a piece of advice for the youths.
uh-huh.
When in your interpersonal relationships, there's a unfortunate tendency for people to just once somebody does something bad, one thing bad, or has one bad attribute, you just cut them out of your life,
Hmm.
and that is dumb. Um, as Solzhenitsyn says, the line between good and evil runs through the middle of every human heart. Everybody you meet is going to have something, if you're around them long enough, that you could excise them for. So don't do that. You lose all
Hmm.
the good things about them in your life. So you should encourage the behavior that you like and want to see more of, and you should gently, retreat a little bit from the behavior you don't like. Send subtle signals, and you will get the best out of people if you follow that approach. Barring
Yeah,
psychopaths, obviously, you run into a psychopath, change your number or whatever. But most people are not psychopaths.
uh-huh. I would like to add on to that like, and when you do come across those moments and find out those things about those people in your life, you have the choice to exercise your compassion
Yeah,
and love for them and strengthen that
you
and
do.
be forgiving and practice your patience,
But
which
boy,
is
that's
so
tough.
powerful.
That's tough
It's very
because
tough.
that can come off as like sanctimonious and fake, you know. But if you can manage to do it in an honest way, that's very powerful. Very
Yeah.
powerful.
I mean, I guess it's circumstantial.
Yes. Life is circumstantial. Everything is context, right?
Yeah. Um dang. Oh, there was one more point I wanted to make off of that, but I forgot it. That's okay.
Um, that context remark I just made makes me think of the law. Um, You'll hear libertarians sometimes say that like the non-aggression principle is stupid. Um, David Friedman makes that argument, I think. Milton's son, and a bunch of others, because like it doesn't tell you specifically what to do in any given situation, right? Like
Hmm.
he'll give the example of you're falling off your 10th floor balcony, but you get lucky and you grab a flagpole on the 9th floor right underneath you, right? But he's right there on the balcony. He says, "That's my property, guy. I'm not giving you authorization to hold on to it or come on
Hmm.
my balcony. Are you going to let go and plunge to your death?" And of course, no. And then he says, "Aha, see, you don't believe in the non aggression principle either." Which I'm sorry, David, that's just stupid. A principle is a universal goal or application. It's a principle. I mean, why look for another word? It only has value when you apply it to specific context. It's not like a rule for your life. I'm going to violate the non aggression principle in your hypothetical construct. Also, all the other ones. I'm starving in the woods. It's snowing. I find a cabin, a hunter's cabin that's warm and well stocked. Am I going to break in, even though that's somebody else's property? You're goddamn right I'm going to break in. But what I'm not going to do is all of a sudden believe that I've rewritten what the law should be. The law is, yeah, that is your flagpole, and I've aggressed against you by maintaining my grip on it and climbing onto your balcony and saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry, guy. I'm leaving through your front door and I'm getting on the elevator. And yeah, I'm going to violate that cabin owner's property rights and eat and not starve and die. But I'm not going to all of a sudden think I don't have a principle of private property because I violate it in an emergency." Guys
Hmm.
like that don't understand the difference between a principle and a context. And yeah, of course I might punch somebody in the face if you say the wrong thing to me. But that doesn't mean I think the law should be that you can punch people in the face. You know what I mean? And all
Yeah.
legal principles are like that. Like the law doesn't necessarily tell you, what the rights you have with your neighbor as far as the tree and the overhanging branches and the wall. Life is messy and contextual, but that doesn't mean principles are not useful things to use to try and fair. That's why the jurisprudence and having a wise judge is such a great thing. They have the wisdom and the legal knowledge to look at the principle and the law and the context and try and fit the one to the other and come to the most judicious opinion. And I think we forget that. Intellectuals forget stuff like that, like how real world messy life is and how that doesn't invalidate true things.
Yeah. And I guess you got me thinking, like, if someone fell right onto my balcony, like, it's so dynamic, I may invite them onto my balcony, in which case it's perhaps a violation. It's not a violation because I'm saying, like, no, you can come onto my balcony and whatnot. And like justice, the context of justice is always unique. And for that circumstance and stuff, like, people are going to be like, well, like, did they take your property? Did they harm your property? Did he fall through and like damage your flagpole or whatnot? So I think I agree with you on that aspect. Um, and you got me thinking. Uh, Back to the new liberty movement and the people and like the youth or like the increasing size of the people in the community, like at Freedom Fest. It is cool. I think the energy is just improving because
I think so.
it's the truth. And we have this spiritual wealth or this not intellectual wealth that is just like it's not in the dark. It's not a minority. It's becoming an increasing majority, and it's exciting for people.
I think so
Uh,
too. I'm a little I'm a little worried about people peeling off and becoming these hard right, almost monarchist types. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I don't want to name any names, but it does seem like to be there's a little bit of a pipeline from people who become attracted to libertarianism, and then get uh, disenchanted because we're still not free. And in
uh,
2024, it's the left that's oppressing us, on the most part. In different years, maybe it was the right, but now it's the left. And gosh darn it, we're not free. So we should use the power of government to just force our will on them. Gosh darn it. I'm a little worried that people they're only making libertarianism a pit stop. And I,
I see.
and I think if to the extent that happens, I think we're not being explicit enough about what it is and how,
Yeah.
if you're going to use power to force your worldview on others, maybe that's a short-term solution, but that's not the answer. Maybe your
Yeah.
generation will be okay in a small enough community where you've made a little fiefdom, but it's a corrupt structure, and it's going to ossify because you've decided that it's okay to use force over other people, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. I personally, I'm not too aware. I know like Curtis Yarvin and Hoppe like discuss the relatively superiority of monarchy to democracy, but I think
Oh,
the
I
natural
agree with
order.
that. Yeah, I agree with that. It's
Yeah.
just that just shows how shitty democracy is,
Right.
not how great monarchs are.
Right. I mean, I honestly think that the next, major step for human freedom will be the abolition of the state, which includes monarchy.
For sure.
And so I,
But
yeah,
it doesn't destroy. In fact, it enhances hierarchy. The natural order has plenty of hierarchy in it. You know, Michael Jordan is better than whoever's the
right.
12th man on that bench. We have tons of hierarchies. The more, the better. It would be bad if it was just one, like a monarchy. But some people think that unless you have democracy, you have nothing but an ossified kingship, and that's not the case. Or if you're not in favor of a king, that you are some sort of an egalitarian and you don't believe in social hierarchy. No, of course there are masters and there are apprentices. That's always going to be with us. It's just I want those associations to be voluntary, and in a free and natural society, they are voluntary. I
Yeah.
respect the heck out of the lady that runs my local little HOA here. She's above me in that sense. That's fine.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I'm not too concerned personally with that libertarian to right wing monarchical fascistic pipeline because I think that still comes from a lack of understanding the personal enterprise, private jurisprudence, private law society, anarcho-capitalism type framework. And I think the more we can learn about that and develop that, even in the monetary sector, then like the more we'll arrive towards that. And so I think the divine rights theory, which has justified monarchies for, I would say, maybe most of their existence, is just not as people are way more ironic and like intellectually seem
I
past
got to
that.
applaud those people back in the day for their creativity. The divine right of kings.
Yeah, it's good. It's
That's a
good.
good one.
Yeah. And now what is beautiful with democracy is how like lack of a basis it has. So it's just like the divine right of the majority. And it's like,
That's not
really?
pretty.
Yeah, it's not
That's
at
not
all.
pretty.
It's yeah, democracy is grotesque, even aesthetically. And I think Thad has made this point which I really like, that the new MAGA movement is and I'm a big fan of like the Red Scare podcast and like Jack the Perfume Nationalist, and they talk about how we kind of have it mixed up where we think the left is having sex orgies and stuff like that. But no, they're the new Puritans, as
That's correct.
Andrew Doyle has
What they
said.
are,
And
what they're, much of their framework is a new religion, a
yes,
couple of new religions.
yes, and it's very fascinating that like their divorce rates are lower than conservatives, and conservatives, which the left has framed as being puritanical, are not. Like the new MAGA movement is Trump is hooking up with like models, so there's this like sex appeal. They're seeking pleasure, and that is wonderful in the aspect that like that I think this movement is more, like you said, like blues and rock and roll comes from freedom, and I think people who recognize that can appreciate the fact that we're humans in our existence and it's okay to have pleasure. Where the left, think about this, the left and Michael Weimer and Dad have talked about this, and credit to Michael where he talks about how like going trans, I don't want to speak for every trans person, but the surgery of changing your sex, the surgery itself is a changing of your pleasure sensory organs. You're cutting off your human ability to have
Yeah,
pleasure. So it's
yeah.
like isn't that fascinating?
It's so perverse. You have a deep unhappiness with yourself, and going through puberty is hell for everybody. If you have, any other things wrong with your family or how you think about, how you look or whatever, it's tough for everybody. But how pernicious is it to have an ideology that thinks, well, I got a cure for this, some hormone blockers and some surgery. I'll mutilate my
Yeah.
body and I'll feel better. Oh
I mean,
man.
so and again, like, because this is more of my generation, that I think it comes back to meaning. And like, like, that's kind of my research in the economics of suicide. I try to incorporate like logotherapy and like Viktor Frankl's his logotherapy being that you have to find meaning in life. And like,
Yes.
if you're lost and you think that this may help you find meaning, like, again, it may be an external solution to an internal situation. So
It's
you still have to deal with yourself and like what you think and feel about yourself, regardless of your external appearance and stuff like that.
for sure, and it's such a first world issue. Like, I haven't done the research on this, but I can't imagine there are any starving people who were gender confused.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right about that.
There's
And
also
I
a metaphysical
uh-huh.
aspect. I know there's a bunch of philosophers who think, the duality between mind and body. But from my perspective, you are your body. Um, I don't know exactly what consciousness is. None of us do. Anybody who says they do is lying. It's a very mysterious concept, and which is weird because it's the most essential, omnipresent aspect of our existence is our consciousness, and we do not understand it. But from anything I can tell, is it arises from our body. It is our body. We are our body. So an ideology that tries to tell you that there's a way that whatever you are, could have been born in the wrong body, I believe that's a metaphysical mistake. You
Hmm.
are your body. There's no
Mm.
separate thing that is distinct that you could have. It could have been that you were supposed to be in a toaster oven or something. I think
Hmm.
that I think that's something that's, if it was more, if that concept was more universally believed at like a base level, an axiom,
Yeah.
I think people would not talk themselves into something as idiotic and destructive as, I was born in the wrong body, I need to mutilate myself to fix it, because I don't think
Yeah.
it does fix it.
I know, like, Maslow in that book talks about like we're physiological beings.
Heck yeah.
Like, the psychology and biology uh go hand in hand. And Thad talks about that. Like, the whole Platonic conception of like the mind body duality is bullshit.
I think so. Yeah,
There's
I
no
think so.
cells that separate, like, with the M for mind and the B for body.
Right.
Like, we have, even what's beautiful about like the whole rise of the like carnivore diet, um is kind of a gateway to uh understanding how government regulations are contributing to like you know health conditions. But the fact that we have like the gut microbiome and the second brain, and how what you eat makes your body and affects your mind and your thoughts, it's like it's like it's fascinating. Like, we are connected.
Jordan Peterson talks about this sort of thing a lot too, right? Like all
Uh-huh.
the various aspects of our deep lizard and mammalian brain that act like little personalities, and how important it is, therefore, to integrate those. Especially when you're two, and then as you grow on older and older. And the most horrifying people in the world, don't turn your back on them, are the people that don't integrate those successfully. But it does illustrate
Yeah.
that what we think of as our id and our ego, it's all tied together, man. We are our body. And just so I don't make a liar out of my own epistemological beliefs, I'm holding the door open that I'm wrong. That maybe you could pull out your soul and throw it in a robot body, and maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that that the mind is something that exists apart from the body. We are our body.
I think the what I mean this is a what I'm assuming the distinction is conflating the mind with like your spirit in the in like the religious metaphysical sense, that like with the whole concept of the afterlife and like your spirit or soul. Like people think that their mind is their soul, and that's separate. Like I know because I was kind of raised in a Christian background that there's the belief that we are not of this world
Yeah.
and that our soul will go on and live on. And I think that has been incorporated by like the left
Yeah.
to to really hammer home the
It's also
idea that
the
you could be in the wrong
it's also the
body.
early version of simulation theory, right? And it's quite
Hmm.
reassuring. I mean, who the heck wants to think that, when you die, you die? And I'd rather have yeah, I'm not from this plane either, and I'll go on in a higher one or whatever. That's a useful frame. You might find me using it on my deathbed. I don't know. I'm not making any
Yeah.
promises, but I don't see any evidence for it. And I believe in thinking about things that way. It's like the free will versus determinism argument. I am very impressed by the rigor of the logic of determinism. But until you can actually program the computer with the state of all the atoms and all the cells of my body, and therefore, predict everything I'm going to do going forward, until you show me that, I'm just going to form a belief system on the basis of the way I experience life every single day, which is me choosing things freely. It may be wrong, but I think you work yourself into contortions to think that you don't have free will just because you have an intuition about how billiard balls operate, when one touches the other with a certain application of force or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my interest is kind of like in life and death and spirituality, more or less. But I think that I don't know. It's very comforting, to like evade death, right? Like,
Sure.
and I don't want to take that away or dismiss it at all. I just
I'm not,
don't
by the
know.
way. You acknowledge that I'm not, right? I'm not closing that door.
Yeah,
There's a difference
yeah,
between me not believing it. That's different than me saying for certain I know that's not the case. Omniscience
yeah.
isn't given to our species in this regard. How the hell would I know? But
Uh huh.
I do think you have to, if someone's going to ask me, do you believe in God and the afterlife and determinism, to take a sharp left turn, I'm going to say no. That belies all the evidence I have at my fingertips, even though that evidence might be wrong, and I am not certain.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can close this podcast out on this note of the completion of life. Uh, what what do you think?
The completion?
I don't know. Just yeah. I mean, like in our life cycle as a human being, you know.
I mean, that could be as big or as small a question as you want. Like, at the end, do I think anything happens? No, I think your consciousness ceases to be. But you said something about the life cycle and the completion, and I don't know, that makes me think about what you should be doing with your time while you still have it, to live a fulfilling life, a meaningful life. And we need to be answering that question every single second of every single day, and it's going to be different for everybody. But I think it's like you were talking on one of your other podcasts there. I forget which one now, but what is meaning? Where do you get it? Oh, it was the professor dude. Um,
Oh,
Jamie.
Jamie White.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you feel it when you've found meaning. You
Hmm.
you completely stop thinking about yourself. It's what they call being in the zone. You are totally engrossed in a thing that is happening, the thing that you are doing, and it's like a tuning fork. It's like hitting a perfect golf shot. It feels good when you found meaning. And I disagreed with the example he threw away as illusory. Tying your shoelace. I'll admit you that's not going to give you a lot of meaning, but I think any thing that you do, you should feel a little bit of meaning in doing it well. Which brings me back to Atlas Shrugged. You haven't read it yet, but all the major people that create the stuff of life in this fictional world, they go on strike. They're sick of being exploited by the government, basically, so they just quit. And one of the guys is a philosopher, and his way of quitting is he just opens up a diner on the side of a road somewhere, and he doesn't do any philosophizing. But what he does do is make a hell of a grilled cheese sandwich, and he runs the best goddamn diner that you will ever see. He finds deep meaning in simple, simple things that provide pleasure and economy to other people. And it just goes to show it doesn't have to be some highfalutin thing. If it's something that strikes that tuning fork in you such that it resonates and you feel meaningful when you do it, keep doing it. Keep finding other things that make you feel that way. Like I said before, like you said, we're embodied creatures. We know when we're doing something meaningful. For millions, it's the family, raising a family, falling in love, taking care of the spouse. But it could be anything. It could be music. It could be art. It could be some passion project. It could be justice. It could be liberty. Um, it could be dozens of things. I mean, I think it's a much more rich environment in life to be passionate and find meaning in multiple things. It'd be sad if it was only one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something like that, and you'll feel it when you're over the target.
I want to agree. I just want to ask, like, if you feel like you're doing something that you found meaning in, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know. I'm just concerned that it's not meaningful to other people.
You're thinking
Like,
about
if it
video
is.
games, aren't you? You play too many video games.
Sure, I think that's a great example. I do play video games.
I think video games, it gives you the sugar high version of that, because you do get good at something, and you do become engrossed, and you do achieve things. But then you pull back and realize that your bed hasn't been made, and the dishes are stacking up in the sink, and your life is it doesn't last. It's the sugar high. It's the fake version, which doesn't
Mm,
mean that we should never play them. It just means that it's a treat. It's dessert. You can't eat dessert every day. Um,
mm,
but
mm.
it does. They design those things to make you feel, to make you get addicted to them. The good ones, you can just fall into that world for hours and hours and hours. I sure do. They're fun. Although since I started writing my Substack and doing my podcast, I haven't picked up the controller since February, I guess.
Mhm.
Which just goes to show I must have found a little more meaning, in some other things. I like writing, I like
Yeah.
talking, I like thinking. I sure hope I pick up some steam.
Yeah.
HamanNature.substack.com and at HamanNature on YouTube.
Yeah. No, you are. I know you'll be a force to reckon with.
Thanks,
Keep
dude.
going. Yeah. Um, that's beautiful. Well, I think this would be a good place to wrap up. So, Adam, thank you very much for your time and your insights.
It was my
I
absolute
really appreciate
pleasure,
it.
and I'm so thrilled we bumped into each other. That was an unexpected treat.
Yeah. I mean, the libertarian community is growing, but
Still,
I think it's always
still
nice
small.
to see. It's
Still
nice to
small.
see familiar faces. Well, thank you very much, Adam. I'm gonna stop the recording.